I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, social pressure. Twitter, Facebook, Google all feeling the squeeze to enact tougher policies and purge more misleading content and accounts. This as President Trump regains control of his Twitter handle. Plus, Amazon pledges $2 billion to save affordable housing in states where the e-commerce giant is expanding. We're going to talk to Amazon SVP Jay Carney, who was also President Obama's former press secretary, about that and the company's talks with the incoming administration amidst tech antitrust scrutiny. And shiny objects need a distraction. What's coming up at next week's Consumer Electronics Show, which kicks off virtually for the first time ever on Monday. Those stories in a moment, but first, U.S. stocks hitting a record today as President-elect Biden called for more stimulus. I want to get straight to Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow, who's been following the market action. Ed, what did you see?
Ending the week on a high, Emily. All U.S. major equity indices in the green. And once again, technology is the outperformer. That's really been the story of the week. You can see the NASDAQ 100 index up around 1.3%. The New York FANG index, that I like to come back to that time to time, that basket of big technology companies up 3%. Two important outperformers, Baidu and Tesla, both in the world of electric vehicles. Baidu up more than 15% today on reports it's going to team up with Geely to make an electric vehicle for the Chinese market. And Tesla continues to dominate the news flow on an incredible run, 11 straight days of gains, up almost 8% on Friday. The question now turns to when will Tesla hit a market cap of $1 trillion, something that the market is watching for closely. But as you said, stimulus firmly in focus. We had a weak December jobs print earlier in Friday's session, a 140,000 slump in payrolls, which was a surprise. But Joe Biden really reinforcing the message that stimulus is coming, reigniting that reflation trade into the end of Friday's session. One slight surprise, the Philadelphia Semiconductor Index, or SOX, flat as a pancake at the close. It's been a real outperformer of recent weeks, cooling off what's been an impressive run. And then Bitcoin. How often have we talked about Bitcoin, Emily? Hovering above 40,000 today, but it's dipped below that a little bit as we've got through Friday. But really the focus now turns towards the Biden presidency, turns towards stimulus checks and that reflation trade as we end the week in risk-on mode.
Meantime, Ed, as we've been speaking, the Washington Post is reporting that Twitter employees, 350 of them, have signed a letter calling on Jack Dorsey and Twitter leadership to permanently suspend the president's account. Of course, he got back access yesterday. He tweeted that video and then some more controversial tweets since, saying he's not going to be at Inauguration Day. I don't see a lot of movement in the stock, but obviously Twitter and Facebook and Google under pressure.
Yeah, not a lot of action in after-hours trade, but it adds to the pressure that we've seen on social media companies on Friday. Twitter down 1.62% during Friday's session, fourth consecutive decline, posting a weekly decline of almost 5%. It's not been a good week for Twitter. Facebook also down 0.4% on Friday. We had several lawmakers in the U.S. basically saying, why did these social media companies, principally targeting Facebook and Twitter, not act sooner in a way that could have perhaps prevented the scenes that we saw in the U.S. Capitol on Friday? You also had Mexico's president calling this, quote, a bad omen, that the other side of the argument, the social media companies were taking action to suppress Donald Trump's accounts. He actually likened it to a, quote, holy acquisition. But definitely continued pressure on social media stocks this Friday as the market weighs up what could happen as the Biden presidency enters the White House.
All right. Well, it's certainly going to be an eventful 2 weeks between now and January 20th. Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow, thank you so much for those updates. As I mentioned, Facebook, Twitter, Google facing mounting pressure from lawmakers, activists, civil rights groups, the public to enact tougher policies and more forcefully purge misleading content and accounts, including the ones held by President Trump himself. This after a mob of pro-Trump protesters, rioters you could call them, stormed the U.S. Capitol. President Trump has regained access to his Twitter account after a 12-hour suspension. Facebook has extended the ban on his posts indefinitely. Joining us now for more, Laura Gomez, founder at Proyecto Solis. She is also a former Twitter employee who has repeatedly called for CEO Jack Dorsey to ban Trump's accounts and warned that politicians could misuse the platform. Laura, thank you so much for joining us. So obviously, I want to get your reaction to this story from the Washington Post that now you have 350 Twitter employees calling on Dorsey to permanently suspend President Trump from the platform. What is your reaction to that?
Well, first applauding those employees, but I did look up how many employees Twitter has, and it is 4,600. So that's about 7% of the employee base. Employee activism can actually play a role in saving democracy. So I hope that more Twitter employees end up signing this letter, and the executive team and the board listen to the employees and what they're telling them about how dangerous Trump being on this platform will be, not only for their own employment, but for all citizens of this country and of the world, to be honest.
How concerned are you that President Trump has access to his Twitter account again and presumably will have access for the next 2 weeks when he is still in office?
I think it's the most dangerous time right now. I have seen it before when he was only a candidate and he attacked a young woman in Florida, and she was harassed and threatened and doxxed. I have seen it during his presidency. And now, in the past couple of months, I saw it again and read it and wrote open letters with Ellen Powell. And here we are, almost point to the close 2 weeks from inauguration. And I think if we do not take his Twitter account away, there will be much, much more violence coming on the day of inauguration afterwards as well.
Now, you, going back a decade to 2010, when you were working at Twitter, you warned them about bringing politicians on the platform. What about their argument? The argument that they've made, to be fair, for 10 years, that world leaders, the public has a right to hear what they have to say, that they have a right to say what they want to say, that there is such a thing as free speech, and that certain things are newsworthy, even if they're potentially false if they are coming out of the mouth of a world leader.
But what is newsworthiness, and how can we just justify all these institutions of democracy? And what is a world leader? Like, there has to be some sort of playbook that they understand and define what a world leader is. Is it a dictator? Is it a despot? Is it a fascist? Is it a democratically elected official? I do not know. So we need to first define what a world leader is and what newsworthiness. There's other platforms to be used for those leaders to actually propagate their information. They don't need to use privately held tech companies for that.
What do you make of the fact that Facebook is actually taking a different and more extreme position than Twitter at this very moment and has banned the president's account indefinitely?
We all know that Twitter has been its main propaganda machine and its main platform through social media. And so Facebook taking action is not really impacting, as President Trump has actually been on Facebook as much as he tweets. Everybody knows that it's Twitter that's really his main platform. So I don't think we should applaud Mark Zuckerberg or Facebook for it, because they're not really the prominent tool that is being used by the president right now to disseminate lies and information and violence.
Facebook, meantime, saying today they've removed over 600 militarized social movements. I mean, there are simply so many of them, whether it is QAnon, Proud Boys, something called Oath Keepers, which some folks may not have heard of. I mean, the fact is, even if the president isn't on the platform, his supporters are there. And so I wonder, is it too late? Is the genie out of the bottle?
It is. And we all warned, and actually many people and people of color and women that worked at these platforms, that use these platforms, warned about the dangers of Trump and all of his supporters and this extremist using this platform. But unfortunately, no one listened. And so here we are, 2 weeks away from inaugurating a new president. And we don't know what Trump is going to do after January 20th. We don't know how he's going to utilize these platforms and what is going to happen, whether what happened on Tuesday will happen again. I believe it will be, and it will be worse than what we saw at the Capitol on Tuesday.
And to be fair, these movements gain steam and life on social media. There's been a lot of talk about what happens after January 20th. Many believe that President Trump will, still be potentially have a future in right-wing media, will be, a leader in some circles, maybe not an official leader of the Republican Party, but certainly inspires, a great following, even though he lost the election. What policy do you think the company should be taking on him, on what he posts after he's not president, when he's just a regular American citizen?
That is what really frustrates me about what's been happening with his account, is that it's all arbitrary. Everything has been done at spur of the moment. We saw that flag that Twitter had about not retweeting or liking his tweet because it would actually promote violence. I've never seen that flag before. Why did they actually put it this week instead of just taking down the account? So I really think that they need to think through all of the policies that they make to actually apply to current world leaders and ex-world leaders, that when they become private citizens, to really stop what's happening online and all of the sort of mobilization of his base, as well as a radicalization of all of these supporters that think it's okay to go to the Capitol and enter and be violent in the process. I'm just stunned that he's still on Twitter right now. I can't believe it, and I do not. And I'm just hoping that the employees at Twitter actually do something, and that they're able to actually talk to the leadership and the board and convince them what their decision could do to this country and to democracy.
All right, well, we'll be watching to see how Jack Dorsey and the executive team react to this latest plea from 350 employees at Twitter, again, who have signed a request calling on Twitter to suspend President Trump's account immediately. Laura Gomez, founder of Proyecto Solas, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights as a former employee yourself. All right, coming up, the Consumer Electronics Show kicks off next week, and it's going to be a lot different this year. Consumer Tech Association CEO Gary Shapiro with us next. This is Bloomberg. The Consumer Electronics Show is going virtual for the first time ever, and this year it will look a lot different for attendees and vendors as the trade show moves to an all-remote platform in the midst of the pandemic. Big areas investors no doubt will be keeping their eyes on: cloud computing, cybersecurity, digital health. With us to look ahead is Gary Shapiro, Consumer Technology Association CEO. Gary, I bet you never thought you'd be doing an all-virtual show, but here we are. Are you excited, apprehensive, open-minded?
I started out open-minded, but now I'm very excited because there's been so much support for it, over 1,800 exhibitors, and plus it gave us an opportunity to reimagine what the CES and the value it has for business in the industry and for connectivity. So we were able to change the show dates. We were able to extend the show by 30 days so the people can react, follow conferences they want to see, talk to exhibitors still, look at what they're offering. And we've also allowed us to connect people. Before the show, we've had over 70,000 people register and opt in to be connected with each other. So the connectivity is there, the personalization is there, and we're using keyword searches, and exhibitors have become very creative in what they're offering and how they're getting the wares. We'll have a lot of live sessions and demonstrations and products, but we'll also have an anchor desk. We'll have amazing speakers. We've been freed from the physical world, and once we realized that, we were able to plan ahead. We announced this in July, and the response has been strong.
Do you think it'll ever actually come back in person? What are your
Oh,
thoughts?
absolutely. We've already signed up several hundred exhibitors for January of 2022 in Las Vegas. Live events are starting to occur already. There's no question about it, especially for example, medical conferences. Doctors that have gotten the vaccine are already agreeing to meet. My wife is one of them. She'll be in March in Colorado at a convention she attends every year because she got the vaccination, as did others. So we're there. We just have to recognize this is an unusual year, take advantage of the digital opportunities that are there. And so much has happened. The world is transformed digitally, and every company is a tech company. And the changes in telehealth,
Right.
telework, teleeducation, so many different aspects of what we do, including mobility. I mean, we have our leadoff keynote speaker is Mary Barra of GM, just announcing a whole new look and feel for GM, electrification. That's what they're doing. And we have great companies out there like Sony, Samsung. We're focusing on 5G, Verizon CEOs speaking, also artificial intelligence. Resilience and smart cities, they look different than they would have a year ago because we've changed how we work, where we work, how we play, how we get around, and what we're looking at. And everything is changing. Health technology is big. Digital health is a huge focus with a few hundred companies showing products. So the industry wants to get together. They want to communicate. They want to meet. We've provided that opportunity. We've teamed up with Microsoft Teams. They've provided the infrastructure, the cybersecurity, the cloud platform, and the production. I'll be at Microsoft headquarters for CES.
All right. Well, we know where to find you. Gary Shapiro, CEO of the Consumer Technology Association. Of course, we're going to be following CES all week long next week. Thanks so much, Gary, for giving us a preview. Coming up, T-Mobile exceeding estimates for fourth quarter subscribers at the expense of AT&T and Verizon. We're going to talk to President and CEO Mike Sievert next. This is Bloomberg. T-Mobile closing the books on 2020 with 5.5 million monthly customers added, the most in the company's history. I caught up with President and CEO Mike Sievert on the heels of the record-breaking year to get his outlook for this year and a new administration, along with relations with China. Take a listen.
You know, it was 5.5 million postpaid subscribers in 2020, the most in our company's history. And I am just so proud of the team. You know, the bottom line is this: customers want a network connection that's reliable, and they want it at a great value right now more than ever. And that's what we deliver. And, you know, regardless of the market conditions, right now, switching is muted in this industry. And we normally grow based on switching, people coming to us from AT&T and Verizon. And even with that muted environment, people aren't in retail stores much. We were able to deliver some of the most impressive growth numbers in our history. And it just shows that the model and what we have to offer consumers and enterprises is really resonating.
So with the number of job losses we've seen, the recession, can subscriber growth come even close this year to what it did last year? What is your outlook for 2021 and how it will be similar and different?
Well, I would expect that now more than ever, people, they're not going to give up this category. Wireless is so essential, but they might be asking themselves whether they have the right provider, whether they could have a better value, because people have to make tough choices out there right now. And we offer the undeniably best value in this industry, while simultaneously building the most extensive 5G network and the highest capacity network in US history. So that's just, no one's ever been able to offer both of those things at the same time before, the best value and the best network. Well, look, if budgets are tight and now's the time to reassess whether you have the right provider, maybe that's a great opportunity for us.
Now, we do face some potentially very grave political uncertainty, at least over the next 2 weeks. Then we have Inauguration Day, a new administration, a Democratic Congress. How do you expect the political climate to impact T-Mobile's priorities?
You know, one of the things, I'll just share an observation. We started this historic turnaround and success run 8 years ago. And that means we've had 4 years of rapid growth and success under the Obama-Biden administration, and 4 years of success under the current administration. So we've shown that our particular business plan, what we offer, what we do, just build the best network, deliver it at the best value, is not susceptible to the political landscape as much as many might guess. And we've shown success under both Democratic and Republican administrations recently.
What is your message to the Biden administration, given that, you know, they will have some impact on, you know, whether it is 5G, certainly FCC issues that do impact T-Mobile?
Well, I certainly hope we'll continue to see a regulatory environment that is pro-growth and pro-consumer. And the other thing I hope and expect we'll see is an environment that really is about working together more. In this country, we need political leadership that moves past the divisiveness and is willing to look at the good and the arguments on both sides and make some compromises and move this country's agenda forward. And that's what I'm hoping that we'll see under this next administration.
Meantime, the New York Stock Exchange is now, for the moment, proceeding with a plan to delist 3 major Chinese telecoms. You don't compete with these companies directly. They are certainly very competitive in 5G. But what is your response to that?
We don't get too involved in it. I will tell you that you're right. I mean, not only do we not compete with the companies, but also we very early on moved away from supplier relationships with some of the large Chinese companies, Huawei, et cetera. And so as this started to unfold over the past 2 or 3 years, it didn't affect us as much as many other global telecoms who were still reliant on that technology.
Now, I do want to ask you about 5G more specifically, especially now that folks are getting phones fully equipped with 5G. There is some concern that all the carriers are wildly exaggerating their 5G capabilities. The Better Business Bureau has voiced these concerns as well. How do you respond to that? And how do you measure, where you really are on 5G?
I think there's some truth to it. People have been breathlessly claiming that 5G is the most transformative thing ever. And the truth is, it's a huge step forward. But let's be realistic. There's 2 variants of 5G out there, and T-Mobile's leading in both. One is the broadly available 5G, typically in low-band spectrum. That means it reaches further from towers. Ours reaches 280 million Americans across 1.6 million square miles. That's 4 times more than Verizon. And it's about twice as fast as LTE. So it's a big step forward if you don't want congestion on your smartphone, you want to be able to reliably stream videos, et cetera. But the exciting part is what we call ultra capacity 5G. And this is where our reality versus Verizon's and AT&T's is so stark. We smashed our goal. We are covering 106 million people with the highest capacity version we offer of 5G. That compares to 2 million over at Verizon. And it just shows that our models are very different. And this part, let's be honest, it is very transformative. 8, maybe 10 times faster than LTE used to be. And so that does enable hardware and software innovation that'll be transformative as to the technology experiences that consumers and businesses have. That part's not exaggeration.
That was T-Mobile CEO Mike Sievert. All right, coming up, unfriending the president. With Trump losing his Facebook privileges for the rest of his term, what does it mean for his future in social media? We'll talk about that next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Back to our top story of the day. Facebook, Twitter, and Google facing mounting pressure from lawmakers, activists, civil rights groups to enact tougher policies and more forcefully purge misleading content and accounts, including President Trump's. This after a mob of pro-Trump rioters stormed the U.S. Capitol. We are joined now by Techonomy founder David Kirkpatrick. David, did you ever think you would see the day that Mark Zuckerberg banned Trump on the platform indefinitely?
Well, hi, Emily. Well, it's funny you ask it that way, because one of the things I was thinking is, it's not inconceivable that Facebook could do anything because its standards and policies have been so inconsistent. So it's not shocking. They kind of do whatever the wind tells them to do. I do think they did the right thing in taking Trump off and through the inauguration of Biden, at least. I hope they go longer. But they're not really a principle-based company when it comes to how they handle political speech, unfortunately.
Meantime, we're getting this reporting from the Washington Post that 350 Twitter employees are calling on Jack Dorsey to suspend President Trump's Twitter account. It was suspended for 12 hours. He deleted the offending tweets and then they reinstated it. And he has used it today to insert even more sort of chaos and confusion into the national conversation. You know, do you think he should be off Twitter for good?
Well, I saw your earlier segment, which was really interesting. I think, honestly, though, by contrast with Facebook, Jack Dorsey is really trying to operate based on some set of principles. One of the things you have to remember about issues like kicking Trump off is that these services are used by heads of state and government leaders all over the world. And in reality, in many, many other countries, incendiary content is being shared by people like Duterte in the Philippines, Orban in Hungary, Bolsonaro in Brazil, et cetera, et cetera. So Jack Dorsey's more of a logical thinker, and he probably is thinking, well, if I kick Trump off permanently, I would have to do the same to be consistent in all these other countries. Whereas Zuckerberg doesn't care about that. His employees protest in the U.S., and they don't even think about Philippines or Brazil, so he does something to placate them. That's more the way Zuckerberg reacts. I honestly think it's much more short-term reactive thinking over there. So I do believe, however, that after the inauguration of Biden, by the principles these companies have established, including Twitter, they will have no choice but to ban Trump permanently, because he has, during his time as president, violated their terms so many times. They've only allowed him to remain because of his government status, his head of state status, his world leader status.
Meantime, you've got the number of lawmakers suggesting the president resign rising, and of course there's still the threat of him being impeached, the 25th Amendment being invoked. Now even Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski is saying she wants the president to resign. She said, I want him to resign. I want him out. He has caused enough damage. She's a senator from Alaska speaking to the Anchorage Daily News. And she even said she might have to split with the Republican Party if this doesn't happen. You know, what do you think is going to happen the next 2 weeks? And how concerned are you about the damage that could be done if he still has this avenue to the public via Twitter and other social media accounts?
Well, first of all, I do believe that if he really does anything new that's incendiary on Twitter, they will shut him down very quickly again. I'm sure they've got people reading every tweet the minute it goes up who are, you know, among the highest level people in the company. So I'm not really worried that Twitter's going to be utilized to really sow further chaos. I don't think they're going to allow that. I think, you know, he is feeling very muzzled. To me, the more interesting question is, are we seeing a turnabout where the enablers of Trump generally across government and society are going to be turned upon in en masse after he's gone? If people like Lisa Murkowski are now calling for him to be removed, that's indicative. If you look at Simon & Schuster canceling Josh Hawley's book deal, that's indicative. I think you're going to see a big shift in Facebook and to a lesser extent Twitter, but Twitter too, are both probably going to get some major blowback after Biden is inaugurated for how indulgent they have been to this man. And it probably, unfortunately for them, is going to increase the likelihood that the newly Democratic government is going to come down with some very strident and stringent new regulations to restrain them.
Well, and our producer, Jackie Lopez, pointed out that it sort of feels like President Trump is getting canceled. I mean, it's not just Facebook and Twitter, but Shopify and Amazon's Twitch. And I wonder if you would, what you think about that characterization, and is it at all, let's be devil's advocate, is it at all an overreaction? Well,
I love the way Jackie thinks. Thank you, Jackie. I don't think it's an overreaction. I mean, I think everyone recognizes, even Mitch McConnell called it an insurrection. You know, I mean, really, that was a terrifying moment in American history that was facilitated and encouraged by an out-of-control rogue president who, you know, it is not overreacting to try to do whatever we can to prevent that sort of thing from happening from him now or from anyone else ever again. So, unfortunately, he is being canceled, and he probably deserves it. There's video going around now that shows him watching the demonstrations and partying. I mean, I don't know if that's made it onto TV. So I just saw it in an email, but this guy really went way too far this time, and he's paying a price.
I did see that video that you're referencing in a Facebook Messenger message. Understand the context there. David Kirkpatrick, always appreciate you putting things into context for us. So many questions remain, especially and even after Inauguration Day. All right, coming up, tension between the United States and China continuing further inflamed in the final days of the Trump administration. What will President-elect Biden do when he takes office? That conversation next. This is Bloomberg. As we've been covering, the New York Stock Exchange is moving forward with delisting 3 Chinese telecom companies, reversing course yet again after the exchange said earlier this week it wouldn't delist them. Authorities in Washington have also been ramping up efforts to deprive Chinese companies of U.S. capital days before President Trump leaves office with an executive order banning U.S. transactions with 8 Chinese apps, including Ant Group's Alipay and Tencent's digital wallet. For more, we're joined by Amy Calico, principal at Albright Stonebridge Group. And Amy, we've been talking about what kind of damage the president could do in the next 2 weeks if he stays in office, and concerns about that. And I wonder if you have those same concerns about the U.S.-China relationship. Do you think he could do damage or, potentially do more damage to the U.S.-China relationship if he stays in office over the next 14 days?
Well, on the negative side of the ledger, of course, we know that the administration is trying to do that within the next few weeks. Of course, the delistings that will happen on Monday, the latest executive order banning American use of commercial payment systems that are Chinese, and the announcement that the American ambassador to the United Nations will travel to Taiwan next week, are all meant to damage the environment that President-elect Biden is going to inherit on January 20th. Your question is the right one. Is there going to be so much damage that it's irreversible over the next 2 weeks? And I do not think so. I think the moves are meant to box in the Biden administration, to inflame U.S.-China relations. But I think in this case, because Beijing knows they are about to start working with a new set of interlocutors, I think the Chinese government isn't going to want to do something to sour the prospects of tempering U.S.-China tensions going forward.
So how does this set up the Biden administration? You use the words boxed in.
Yes, I think it is pretty obvious that many of the policies that the Trump administration is putting in place, like Tuesday's executive order that won't go into effect until February, is meant to try to put constraints on the ability of the Biden administration to set its own course with China. But I think the transition team has already said that some of these lately introduced policies, executive orders by the Trump administration, will be reviewed by the Biden administration before it decides whether and how to implement them or roll them back. And so on the one hand, I don't think that the Trump administration moves necessarily have to box in the Biden administration. However, on the other hand, the mood on U.S.-China relations here in Washington is so negative. It is true that it would be difficult for President-elect Biden immediately to roll back tariffs or to cancel the Phase 1 trade agreement in search of something maybe less tough on China. And so we know that the Biden team is coming in with a very clear-eyed view of the challenges it faces with China, but it is determined to set its own course going forward and not be influenced by the Trump administration, particularly some of these pretty badly written, sloppily written policies just put in place over the past month.
Meantime, the Chinese government itself is getting more aggressive on its own companies, its own, tech entrepreneurs. There are these new antitrust investigations, new regulations. Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, is now out of public view. That's being seen as a sort of a stern warning. No one is bigger than the party, if you will. And I'm curious how that changes the game for Biden.
Well, I have to say, unfortunately, it does, I'm sure, make the Biden administration and anybody looking at the independence of private Chinese companies' ability to operate in China a little bit more wary, right? There has long been talk within the Trump administration about whether or not it should include Alibaba in restrictions being put in place on American investor activity with Alibaba, which of course is listed in the United States. And the argument against that is because Alibaba is a private company. But like you said, the Chinese government itself is determined to get into Alibaba, break up part of the company, and likely put more controls in place, which unfortunately will only enhance concerns that any user data that Alibaba gets a hold of American citizens could fall to the hands of the Chinese government.
Amy Calico, Albright Stonebridge, thank you so much for helping us navigate a thicket of very difficult topics. Thank you. Still ahead, Amazon announcing the launch of their $2 billion housing equity fund. I spoke with Jay Carney, Amazon's Senior Vice President of Global Corporate Affairs, about how the company plans to tackle the housing crisis. That's next. This is Bloomberg. Amazon has pledged more than $2 billion to preserve and create over 20,000 affordable housing units in areas where the company is expanding, in Washington, Virginia, in Tennessee. I spoke with Amazon's Jay Carney, who's also President Obama's former press secretary, and asked what spurred the e-commerce giant to act now.
We obviously are a large company and a growing company. We have big employee bases in the Puget Sound region. We are growing a very large employee base here in the DC region in Northern Virginia. And we have a substantial employee base in Nashville. And these are all three urban areas that have an affordable housing problem. Not unique. It's a familiar one, as you know, in the Bay Area, familiar in many places in the country. What we like about our ability to try to help address this challenge is that we really are in multiple places. So we can do it where we have a significant presence, and we can do it, in three different locations in three different parts of the country. So we're committed to trying to help. We know that the private sector can't take the lead in addressing this challenge because governments, state and local governments, have the regulatory power and the lawmaking power, and they need to act. But we feel like we can help make a difference with this equity fund.
So speaking of the private sector, other big companies, other big tech companies have tried to address the issue as well. And I wonder if you looked at any of the approaches of Microsoft or Google or Facebook or Apple, and if there was anything there you tried to emulate or avoid.
We certainly looked at what others were doing in this space. What we decided to do was focus on preserving existing housing units, making them affordable, and allowing them to be affordable for many years into the future, rather than focusing on building new units because we wanted to take advantage of the speed. We're also providing substantial loan guarantees for big portions of the deals required here, so that we're not just a layer of financing and as you can see, as some others approach this, and that means we can move quickly. I mean, the two initiatives we announced today, one in Northern Virginia in Arlington, where our second headquarters is located, and one in Puget Sound, I mean, they came together in a matter of weeks, literally, and that's because of the scale that we were able to bring and the way that the housing agencies were able to take that scale and put it to work.
Now, we know that the housing crisis disproportionately affects communities of color. How does this address that?
One of the things we're trying to do that I think is a little novel in our approach is not just provide the loan guarantees, but also provide grants to NGOs and minority-led organizations that are focused on serving communities of color as they try to address this problem. So we're very excited about that piece of it. And we're hoping that we can have an impact here. We, like everything we do, we don't presume success. We measure it every day, and we're going to see hopefully some positive results here.
What is your sense of whether post-pandemic Amazon is going to need more or less office space long term?
We have not made any formal decisions around what the future of our work looks like. We've extended our work from home policy for our corporate employees through the school year, and we'll continue to assess that as we look at how states are getting their citizens vaccinated and what the various rules and regulations are in our locations. I think we think as leadership at Amazon that in-person work is important when it comes to the kind of idea generation at a whiteboard that some of our technical teams do every day. I think there's advantages to being at work. So I don't anticipate Amazon going fully virtual at all. We're continuing to grow, as you mentioned, in our headquarters right here in DC. Or the DC area, Northern Virginia, we continue to hire and we continue to build out that campus, and we're looking forward to being able to occupy our offices there when they're ready.
If 2020 was crisis mode, Amazon hired a ton of people, 400,000 people last year. How is 2021 different in terms of staffing and demand?
Well, we don't know yet, obviously, what 2021 will bring in terms of COVID. Hopefully, as the vaccines get distributed and taken by citizens and also, of course, in our areas around the world, we'll begin to get beyond this. But we never make predictions because it's really up to our customers.
What is the message that Amazon wants to is sending to the new administration, which will arrive with, to be fair, a full plate of regulatory issues? There's antitrust scrutiny facing Amazon. And are you having conversations with transition officials to convey that message?
Well, let me just say, Emily, first of all, Amazon's been around for 5 presidents. And, we've engaged as a company, with every administration, and as we have with the current one, and we will with the Biden administration. The answer to your question is we have a lot, I think, of opportunity to align with the incoming administration and its objectives around raising the minimum wage, which is woefully low. We raised our minimum wage to $15 an hour, 2 years ago, and we've seen some other companies follow suit, but it needs to be, we think, something that Congress acts on. We also have already offered our help in whatever way we can provide it on COVID relief. We have a lot of experience, as you know, because of our frontline workers out there in our fulfillment centers. The actions that we've taken to keep them safe. We've created our own lab facilities and testing facilities capacity and so we have a lot of experience to bear there, and we have tools that AWS can offer also. So we're looking for, and sustainability is another one with the climate pledge. This administration, this incoming administration, I'm happy to say, is going to take the challenge of climate change seriously, and we think we can help with that. So we're not going to agree on everything. Certainly never happened in the past. But I personally, as you can imagine, am thrilled having worked for Joe Biden. He's a man of high integrity and decency, and he takes the job seriously. I saw that every day. and I expect he'll be a good president.
So are you having conversations with transition officials now, or have those conversations already started?
We've had conversations, and I don't think we're alone, with the folks focusing on COVID relief. And they're the advisory council they have, and we've offered up suggestions, our experiences, and we're open to any ideas the administration might have, or the incoming administration might have, and how we can help. And then we have, just as we, as you would expect, we obviously, as a broader organization, have conversations with elected officials all the time and incoming administration officials. So, but the focus we've had has been on COVID.
Okay, and I have to ask, given you're President Obama's former press secretary, any chance you'll be taking a job in the administration? Have you considered that, or would you?
I have no plans, and I mean that sincerely. I had the best 5.5 years, I think, of anybody I know who's done this. I got to be Joe Biden's communications director, Barack Obama's press secretary. I loved every minute of it. And then I ended up at Amazon, and I've loved every minute of this. So I think Vice President Biden, President-elect Biden is surrounded with an incredibly competent group of people. Jen Psaki, the incoming White House press secretary, is somebody I worked very closely with and a friend. And I really don't think you could have a better choice. She's fantastic. So, they've got plenty of good people, and they don't need me.
Jay Carney there, Amazon Senior Vice President of Global Corporate Affairs. And that's it for this Friday.